Okay, everyone. So welcome to our first webinar today. We're going to be discussing e-commerce. So how to navigate this channel for sales success. And I am Kate LaBrosse. I am the founder and CEO of Kate LaBrosse Consulting. I have my whole team with me here today, including Chris Brudzinski, who is an e-commerce expert and help put together this really informative deck that you guys are going to be seeing today. So we're excited to share this with you and answer any questions that you have. So Chris, welcome. Thanks a lot for being here.
Of course, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Excited to talk ecom.
Yeah, great. Me too. Let's jump right in, huh? Okay, so we're going to start just real quickly going over the growth story so that you guys really understand what's happening in this channel and what the opportunity is, and honestly, just how important it is to the future success of your brand. So what we're looking at here on the left is a graph of actual sales, and then a growth chart through 2025, which is what we see over on the right. The chart shows 2023. And really what this boils down to, you guys, is that the opportunity here in e-com, it's growing, it's not slowing. And not only are we seeing the overall growth of e-com increase, we're also seeing the percent share of what e-com has for the overall sales of food, drugs, and HBC, health and body care. And looking out to 2025, there's some projected numbers that are showing e-com to actually take up about 20% of the total share of the total sales of this full category. And then, so this slide is really interesting to me. We actually look at all channels and their e-com counterparts, and we get to see how e-com, which is that little pink dot, the blue dot or the blue square is what the accounts are doing in their brick and mortar side of the business, and then the pink dot is what the growth is on their e-com side. So if we just take a couple examples here, if we look at Club, for instance, we see that the projected growth, overall growth of Club, is about 4%. This is through 2023 again. But if we look at the growth of the e-com segment of Club business, it's 24%. So the e-com portion is driving most of this growth. And we see this across channels. We see similar numbers in drug, in mass, which is going to be accounts like your Walmarts and Targets, and your supermarkets. Supermarket is 17% e-com growth with only 2% brick and mortar growth. So this to me really highlights the importance of this channel, and not only from your perspective as a brand, as a manufacturer, but also from the retailer side. They're putting more efforts into their own e-com platforms. And then obviously we know that COVID has had a massive impact in the e-com segment of business. We know that more shoppers have moved to this platform because of COVID. You can see some numbers over there on the left showing increases across several large retailers or platforms. So Costco is up 87% in Q2. Target is up over 100% in Q1. Instacart is up 400 to 500% between Q1 and Q2, and Kroger is up 97% in Q1. So obviously some really massive growth opportunities there. And there was just a recent survey that came out from Oracle Grocery showing that 53% of respondents have shopped online for groceries during COVID, and that 93% of those surveyed say that they actually plan to keep ordering online even after the pandemic is over. 74% noted that they'll actually order at the same pace or even a greater pace once the pandemic is over. And we're seeing this across demographics. This is not just a millennial thing. We're seeing Gen Xers and baby boomers shopping online during COVID and reportedly after COVID at the same rates. So what do we mean when we say e-commerce? It's kind of a loaded term and there's lots of different names for it. But really what it boils down to, e-commerce is anytime you are purchasing something on a device, whether that is a tablet, a phone, your computer, whatever that might be, it's not purchasing it at shelf. And for us, really, when we look at this, one of the other interesting components about e-com is that it's evolved into not just a shopping platform, but it's actually a way that consumers research your products. So it's super important about how you show up online and making sure that you have an online presence, not just again for that sale, but because consumers are looking on Amazon and other platforms to see how your product ranks. We can see in that graph down on the bottom left there that where shoppers are starting their search is Amazon, and then search engines is going to be your Googles and things, and then retail sites. So those first three are where shoppers are looking to gauge whether or not they want to buy your product. Over 60% of all online product searches start on Amazon. And we're going to talk about this a little bit later and why it's so important to have an Amazon page that is really well established, really well built out, because again, it's not just a place that people are buying your products. 58% of total US retail sales will be influenced by digital in 2023. And then, as I said before, the bottom line is that you as a brand owner or a brand stakeholder, you need to show up right online and really build your online presence.
Okay, so Kate really just laid out for you kind of the key points of the e-com growth story and why the channel is so important for brands to sort of get a hold of now more than ever. And she also just talked a little bit about why e-com is so important kind of from a dual perspective, not only as a sales channel, but also as a key digital touch point. And the next thing we're going to talk about here is, I think when you're first starting out in e-com, the channel can be very sort of big and unwieldy and confusing at times. And so what I think is helpful is to really break it down and understand the different models that exist kind of within the broader channel. So what we're going to do here is kind of lay out what we've kind of considered here as four key sub-channels within the broader e-commerce channel, give you a little definition for how each of the models works and how to think about them, and then some key considerations to think about as you think about kind of your e-com strategy and how to start. So the four channels that we're going to cover here, we've got on the far left, direct to consumer. We've got online marketplaces like Amazon as the second channel, pure play retailers like a Thrive Market or a Vitacost, and then omni-channel, which in a lot of ways is sort of the most confusing, which we'll cover in more detail later on as well. So starting over on the left on direct to consumer, when we think about kind of what this model is, the best way to think about it is kind of right in the title, right? So what this basically means is brands are bypassing retailers. They're setting up their own websites and they're selling their products directly to that end consumer. And usually the way that happens is, you're going to use a platform like a Shopify or a Magento. There's a lot of them out there, but you're setting up your own website and you're selling your product straight to the consumer. In a lot of ways, this is kind of the golden kind of nugget that everybody's after, because there's a lot of benefits to the channel. So, obviously, because you're bypassing a retailer, you get to keep all that extra margin for yourself. It's really kind of the best way to get direct one-to-one relationships with your consumers, get feedback on products, especially as you're starting out and you're iterating and you're kind of figuring out what consumers like or dislike about your products, because you have those sort of one-to-one relationships through your own website. So lots of benefits to the channel.
Hey, Chris.
Yes.
So I would say too that, we're seeing more brands, obviously with COVID, this has become even more important to have this as a platform in your business,
Sure.
but that brands are using their DTC or their own website traffic, their own website business and sales as now part of the metric, the sales story when they go into retail. Would you say that is something that you're seeing as well?
For sure, yeah, and I think it's helpful in general because when you're a new brand and you're starting out, obviously when you're going to retail and pitching to buyers, if you have no sales history, no track record, it makes the sales story a little bit more difficult. And so I think having those direct to consumer sales, being able to show that you have revenue, to be able to have feedback that you've gotten directly from consumers through that channel, to be able to take to buyers as you're trying to get into broader retail is a super beneficial point.
Cool. Great.
So yeah, and then the last thing I'll say on direct to consumer, a lot of benefits, just some things to keep in mind. With those benefits, there are some challenges to keep in mind, I would say. Obviously, you have to kind of stand up your own website and do all the legwork that goes into managing a direct to consumer site. The other thing is just because you have a website doesn't necessarily mean people are going to show up to it. So you are going to have to plan to invest in marketing, digital marketing, and things like that to drive traffic to your website to be able to get that consumer feedback and build those relationships. You'll also have to think through logistics and how you're actually going to ship products out to consumers. We'll talk about that a little bit more later.
Yeah, and I just want to add too that we actually are doing a separate webinar on digital and in-store marketing, and we'll talk about some levers that you can pull in the digital space to help drive consumer engagement to your website and build your online community.
Okay, then the next sub channel we'll talk about is online marketplaces. And I think the kind of biggest one that everybody knows, of course, and the biggest one in the space is Amazon. So what I mean by an online marketplace, this is really a website that acts as a marketplace for individuals to come and list their products to sell through that website. So you can think about eBay as another major marketplace. We're going to focus on Amazon for the purposes of this presentation. So, we'll talk about Amazon more specifically in more detail later, but essentially, right, Amazon sells in two ways. They buy products from brands themselves and they sell them through their own website themselves. But another huge portion of the sales, and actually the majority of the sales that happen on Amazon, are from individual sellers, individual brands who choose to list their products on Amazon and then sell through that platform. So some of the big, huge immediate benefits of this, Amazon obviously generates a ton of web traffic. So there are billions of people every day that visit Amazon. So unlike direct to consumer, where you have to generate all that traffic yourself to your own website, that traffic's already there for you. So that's one of the major benefits, sort of the simplicity of getting set up on Amazon, all those things, immediate access to traffic. A caveat there though is because Amazon's so big and because there are so many sellers and products, you definitely have to plan to invest in the platform, in digital advertising, and really invest in optimizing your product pages and really your presence on Amazon to be able to cut through all that clutter. So just because you list a product on Amazon doesn't necessarily mean it's going to start selling. In fact, it's usually the opposite. You have to really do a lot of work to kind of get sales to cut through all the other products that exist there.
Yeah, and Chris, you're going to talk a little bit more about some of those specifics in a few slides, right?
Yep.
Great.
For sure. Yep, we've got a whole slide on Amazon.
Great.
Okay, the next one, pure play retail. Basically what this model is this, you can think of these retailers in this vertical as really just like any other retailer that you would deal with, except for instead of selling in stores, they're selling online. And so I like to say this kind of vertical is sort of the least e-commy of all the channels. In that for brands, working with a pure play retailer is very much like working with a brick and mortar store in a lot of ways. So usually these sites, they'll have buyers just like a retailer would, gatekeepers that you're actually going to have to sell into. And then once you do, typically you're going to either, sell directly to that retailer, or, a lot of these online pure play retailers like to buy from distributors. So it requires slotting in distributors potentially depending on who you're going after. And then really, there's some digital marketing considerations and some things that, you need to work on that are unique from the brick and mortar space. But in a lot of ways, it's just like dealing with any other retailer. And these are great additional distribution opportunities to think about.
And Chris, when you say pure play, I just want to make sure that we're really clarifying this.
Yeah.
What you mean by that is they don't have brick and mortar locations. Is that correct? These are only
for the most
online?
part, yes. Yeah, what I'd say in e-com, terms are changing very quickly as retailers experiment with different things. For example, Amazon now has physical stores.
Right.
And so the lines are blurred, but in general, that's kind of where the term comes from, is that
Right.
they're only online, purely online.
Yeah, and then the omni-channel, which you're going to talk about next, that can be like a mix then, right?
Exactly.
Okay, great.
Yep. And so the last one, omni-channel, usually what this means is, think about this as your traditional brick and mortar retailer that has stores that is now selling online as well, either through delivery or buy online and pick up in store, which is sort of a really rapidly growing piece of a lot of retail's e-com businesses. And so, the way to think about this, we'll talk in more detail again later, but, this in many ways for brands is exactly like dealing with um, the brick and mortar retailer in question. So you're going to get distribution in a brick and mortar retailer. And then once you're there, you're going to want to do certain things, digital marketing, advertising, digital product content, and things like that to really accelerate your growth within that physical brick and mortar retailer's omni-channel business.
Cool.
And so we'll talk in more detail about this one too.
Yeah, great. And I had some questions around that, Chris, and we can get to that. But, what's coming up for me is, are there multiple buyers then? Are you meeting with the e-com Kroger buyer and a brick and mortar Kroger buyer? And, how does all that work? So I'm assuming you're going to talk about that in one of the future.
We'll talk about that a little bit.
Perfect. Great.
Like everything, it's in this space, it's a little messy.
Great.
Okay, so those were the four kind of main verticals that we wanted to talk through to kind of help with an understanding of the broader e-commerce landscape and make sense of it. Another thing I like to do is just try to think about other ways to visualize those four verticals and the retailers that lie within them, just to help you kind of visualize, kind of who's who and how are they differentiated. And so what we did here was just put together this little graphic that has two axes on it. The vertical axis is web traffic. So think about this as sort of the overall size of the platform, the website, in terms of how many people are visiting that site every day. And then the horizontal axis is the assortment strategy. So on the left-hand side, you've got Amazon, right? Amazon in the upper left. Amazon's huge. It's got, gets a billion people visiting every day. But they're also what they call themselves specifically is the everything store. So their assortment strategy is basically just to carry every product on earth, which means for you as a brand, it can be really hard to cut through, right, and try to stand out.
Right.
And there's lots of different consumers shopping Amazon. Whereas if you look kind of more in the bottom right, this is kind of where you get some of these websites like a Thrive Market, a Growth Collaborative, that maybe don't have the size and scale of an Amazon in terms of consumers visiting them, but what they do have is a really targeted consumer set that's visiting, because consumers visit them for a very specific reason, because they have a much more niche, kind of typically in this context, health and wellness focused, natural organic focused assortment that they carry and mission statement kind of associated with their retail operation.
Yeah, I think this is such a great visual, Chris. I'm really glad that you included this. And for me, one of the things that comes up is, especially as, an emerging brand, and we'll talk about this a little bit later too, but it's important to have a strategy and to understand how each of these retailers might fit into that, and how you might want to use them in different ways. And sort of for kind of different purposes. Not all sales are created equal, and they each serve kind of a different purpose. So it's good to have this visual.
Yep, for sure. And I think that's exactly the way to think about it.
Great. Okay, so now, Chris, we're going to start going over some specific retailers in this channel. And I know you're going to start us off really kind of looking at a deeper dive of Amazon. And we're going to go through all the key retailers that we've identified and give you kind of the basic, the 101 on each of these accounts, and what are our sort of like key takeaways that you need to know about each of them.
Yep. Okay, so starting with Amazon, which is in a lot of ways kind of the most complex of all the retailers we're going to talk about today, I think. We wanted to cover on a few kind of key points here to give you a good picture of where to start when thinking about how to tackle Amazon. So the first thing we wanted to talk through was just the different kind of ways that Amazon goes to market and the different ways you can interact with them as a brand. And so I wanted to distinguish between a few different ways of selling on Amazon, because that can be very confusing. So really, Amazon, there's kind of 2 to 3 main ways that you can sell products as a brand through Amazon. The first way is what they call 1P or first party selling. And this is essentially when Amazon buys inventory just like any other retailer would, and then they turn around and sell it themselves. This is really kind of invite only at this point. And so usually what you see with Amazon is kind of once your brand reaches a certain size and scale, they'll reach out to you and ask that they be able to carry your products and purchase them as 1P. So for the purposes, especially of kind of smaller brands and things, it's not doesn't need to be such a concern kind of right off the bat. The second way of selling that we'll talk about here is, I think, kind of the best way to start, especially for small brands, and that's 3P or third-party selling. And so that's essentially when a brand, basically you sign up for your own kind of Amazon, what's called a Seller Central account. And then you go in, you set up products yourself, right, in a self-serve portal, you list them on the website, and then you start selling yourself. And so this is really the way that, a lot of brands start out on Amazon. Is really the kind of the simplest way to get going, and kind of the way we'd recommend starting on Amazon. And then one other one that I just wanted to touch on because it's in the news a lot is Amazon Fresh. This is Amazon's full basket grocery delivery business that they have. And I guess kind of the key way to think about Amazon Fresh is that this is sort of like your Instacart or some of the omni-channel players that we'll talk about a little bit later. The one thing I'd say about Amazon Fresh is this is kind of the one piece of Amazon that has actual sort of buyers and requires sell-in, and it's a little bit harder to get into, especially starting out. So we're not going to cover that in a lot of detail here, but just kind of wanted you to be aware that's another piece of Amazon that gets talked about.
Chris, how does that differ from Prime Now? Because that's sort of like an immediate grocery delivery too.
Yeah, so it's Fresh and Prime Now. Actually, they used to be two very separate teams, and now they've actually been combined over the last couple of years into one team. Prime Now is actually kind of being deprioritized in a lot of ways. It used to be the difference was that Prime Now was their ultra fast delivery, 1 to 2 hour delivery option. It was available in sort of less markets, and the assortment was smaller because they didn't, they didn't carry as many products to be able to offer that super fast delivery option. Whereas Amazon Fresh had a much broader assortment of grocery items, kind of full grocery selection. But usually it was next day delivery.
Got it.
And there used to be a membership fee associated with it as well. So kind of two different models that they've sort of blended over time.
Cool, thank you.
Yep, okay. So those are kind of the different ways to sell on Amazon. Another next thing we'll talk about briefly here is just the different ways that products actually get sort of fulfilled in the logistical piece of dealing with Amazon. So there's really two ways, assuming you're going to sell as a third party. So you've created your Seller Central account, you start listing items on Amazon. The main way that brands start selling through Amazon right off the bat is through a program called Fulfillment by Amazon, or FBA. You'll see it referred to. And this is essentially a program that allows you to ship your products to an Amazon warehouse. They charge you a fee, and it varies by category and things, for everything that you send into their warehouse. And then Amazon actually does all of the fulfillment for you. And the main benefit for that, of course, is it's drastically reduces the complexity on the brand side of having to actually deliver products to the end consumer. You actually allow your products to be Prime eligible by participating in this program because Amazon trusts themselves to meet their Prime shipping criteria, and not so much brands, especially small ones. So that program is kind of the main way that I think brands typically starting out on Amazon like to participate. The other option is kind of a more traditional drop ship option, which is basically where you're listing your products on Amazon, and then when an order comes through, it comes straight through to you, and you're responsible for that end fulfillment to the end consumer, which is just a lot more complex usually for brands, and also sort of stops you from achieving that Prime badge, which is a big thing for consumers, especially when they're shopping. They like to have Prime eligible products because Amazon doesn't trust you to meet their criteria.
So Chris, could you be a 3P Amazon account and FBA?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
So usually you're both. Yep. So they usually kind of come hand in hand.
Great.
Yep. So you're going to be a 3P seller, and you're going to be a 3P FBA seller. That's kind of the main way that brands sell.
And would that be kind of your recommendation on how to start out?
Yeah, unless you have sort of a robust fulfillment network set up, or you're super confident in your ability to turn around deliveries at scale in 1 to 2 days. That's really the best way to do it. And like I said, one of the big benefits is, a lot of shoppers, when they're shopping Amazon, not only are a lot of them Prime members, but they've sort of been trained to look for that Prime eligible Prime badge. And so like Amazon has now set this crazy expectation that, you get a package in 1 day or 2 days. And so if it's not Prime eligible on the site, a lot of consumers will kind of say, I'm not so interested. I'll look for something else.
Okay, great.
Yep. Okay, and then just two last things to think about when you're starting out on Amazon. Um, one thing when you're thinking about pricing and unit economics, we'll talk about this a little bit later here, but one of the key benefits when you actually sell as a 3P on Amazon is that you get to control the pricing. So you set the price that the consumer sees. When you sell 1P and Amazon actually owns the inventory and things, they get to control pricing. And one of the things that Amazon does is they sort of really aggressively like to price match everything else that's out in the marketplace, and it can cause sort of problems over time with price erosion. And so, one of the benefits is starting out selling it as a 3P is you get to control that pricing.
Great.
Yep. We'll talk about unit economics, I think, a little bit later. We won't touch on that here. But the last thing I'll say on Amazon before we kind of wrap up with the key takeaways here is I mentioned earlier, marketing and advertising on this platform, and also developing really quality product detail pages, the sort of page that pops up that's associated with your product when a consumer goes to buy, is super critical. So, Amazon's algorithm is really built to factor in a lot of the different elements of the product detail page that you as a brand set up for your products to determine sort of what they should be surfacing to consumers as they search for different search terms. And so if you don't have your titles and your bullet points and your product descriptions, your images really on point, their algorithm won't even be able to pick up your product to surface to a consumer. So that's super important. Review generation is another super important part of that. There are review thresholds that will bring you higher up in search rankings. So getting all that in order is really important. And then on the advertising piece, that's another thing. There are so many products and so many brands on Amazon. When you start out, you don't have any sales on the platform, you're going to fall to that very bottom of search. And so nobody's going to find you, basically, and you're not going to get any sales. And one of the ways to overcome that is to start advertising with some of the self-serve tools that they have to actually elevate your products in search so that consumers can actually find them. Once you start getting some sales going, your sort of search rankings, your organic rankings start to rise. And over time, you start to be able to sustain some sales without as much advertising. But that's one of the kind of key considerations for Amazon.
And Chris, I'm wondering if brands, especially when they're just starting out on Amazon, if they might do sort of like a blast to their community to solicit reviews from shoppers who are already purchasing them from some other space. Yeah. Does that happen?
You can do that. Amazon's developed some pretty sophisticated ways over the years to stop. They actually, like, one of the things you'll see is if they basically catch on to you, say, soliciting your family members or friend network to leave reviews, they'll actually flag those and delete them. They're like that good at monitoring that stuff.
Yeah.
So, you can certainly putting your products out on social channels, trying to get people to go buy products on Amazon and then hoping they leave reviews is a really good strategy. The other thing is Amazon has a program called the Vine program. So if you sign up for a 3P Seller Central account, what you can actually do is you can go in there and you can actually participate in this program where Amazon has a big list of people that they'll actually send your products to, specifically to leave a professional review. You of course pay for that. But it's kind of one of the ways to get sort of a quote unquote trusted review and build that inventory a lot more quickly than it would take sort of normally.
Cool, thanks.
So multiple options. Yep. Okay, so then just really quick to wrap up, I think Amazon, like we said earlier, it's a super important digital touch point, in addition to sales channels. So even if it's not going to be a huge part of your sort of sales go-to-market strategy, when people are researching your products, you want them to be able to come to an Amazon page that looks really good and provides a good presence. If you really want to get those kind of sales growing and things, quality product detail pages and advertising are super key to get that sales traction going. And then at the end of the day, I think, starting that Seller Central 3P account and just sort of taking a slow test and learn approach is really the best way to start going on Amazon.
Cool. So great, Chris. Thank you. So you guys, we're going a little bit deeper into Amazon and the omni-channel, just because these are more complex places to kind of manage and think about. As we go through some of the other retailers, we'll go through them a bit more quickly.
Yep. Okay. So omni-channel, I mentioned this is a little bit confusing, I think, to start understanding at first, but it becomes simpler. So really quick on this, we already sort of defined it earlier, but in addition to kind of understanding that kind of what an omni-channel retailer is a brick and mortar retailer that now offers e-commerce options, whether that be through delivery or pickup. Another thing to understand is whether the model is being sort of owned and operated by the retailer or sort of farmed out to a third party. And so what I mean by that is an owned and operated omnichannel example would be like a Walmart. So Walmart owns their own online grocery website. They own all their own infrastructure, all the advertising, all that kind of stuff. And then they partner with different third parties and then also have some of their own delivery where they actually sort of control the delivery of the products to the end consumer. And so some of the big retailers are able to do that. An example of a third party omnichannel retailer is like your Instacart or your Shipt. So this is basically a third party that has developed sort of a suite of e-commerce tools. They go and then partner with retailers to say, hey, we'll manage the website, we'll handle the delivery, we'll do all those hard things that take a lot of time and effort and money to stand up. And then, what we want from you is just partnership and data sharing, and then of course the inventory. So, what Instacart does, of course, is they partner with retailers, and then, they go into their Instacart shoppers go into the store, pick products that have been ordered through the Instacart platform, and then deliver them to your house. So those are kind of the two different models and kind of the way you interact with an omni-channel retailer. Like a Walmart versus an Instacart is very different, which is kind of what we'll talk about
And
here.
Chris, so you might get to this, but Instacart,
Yep.
As a brand, do you actually have to manage that, or is the retailer sort of managing that on your behalf?
The retailer is more or less managing the actual distribution and availability of products through Instacart. So,
and then do you have to do something with your product pages or anything like that?
Sort of. So basically the way it usually works is if you have distribution in a brick and mortar retailer that's partnered with Instacart, Instacart will by default make that product available through Instacart, through that retailer. And they'll have the basics of your product detail pages by default. So they're going to get an image from the retailer, usually the buyer or some sort of digital team. They're going to get, a nutrition facts panel, those very basics, pricing, all those things. A lot of times, if you want to go above and beyond and really kind of build out better detail pages, that's where you'd start to interact with Instacart directly.
Okay.
And there are different ways to do that. And then the other thing I'd say is the main way that brands interact with Instacart is through advertising, because Instacart manages all of those things.
Okay, great.
Yep. So I think that's kind of a nice segue into kind of, talking about the main way to interact with omnichannel retail and how to think about it. Like I said, in general, if you get distribution in a brick and mortar retailer that also sells online, you're by default going to be in both. So it's usually not two kind of separate pools of distribution or anything like that. The main way that you as a brand need to think about kind of accelerating your omnichannel business is through the product content that you're going to be able to work with the retailer on to build out your product detail pages, just like we talked about on Amazon, and then the advertising tools that these retailers provide. So those are the main ways that you sort of interact with these retailers. I think as a good example, take Instacart. When you get brick and mortar distribution and it starts flowing through Instacart, Instacart has a whole host of self-serve advertising capabilities that they actually just launched not too long ago, I think back in March, that allow you to do paid search and display advertising to make your products more visible to consumers to help drive those online sales. And I think the benefits there are obviously you're getting accelerated sales on the e-commerce portion of those retailers' business, which is great for you, but it's also great for the retailer and for you to be able to take back to the retailer and say, hey, look, we know that e-commerce is a huge part of your strategy right now. It's kind of all the rage. And it's super important to you. Look what we're doing online and look at how we're driving sales there. I think makes for a powerful sales story kind of back to those retail buyers. And so I think, it kind of gives you those dual benefits. The other thing I'd say about what we know about e-commerce as it relates to omnichannel is usually when a consumer buys a product online from a retailer, they tend to stick with it a little bit more. And the reason is, most online retailers have different features on their websites, like, buy it again functionality, for example, or a, sort of a pre-built cart option where you can just sort of take products that you purchased in the past and just kind of repurchase them. So once a consumer is kind of purchased online first, they tend to kind of stick and repeat more often. And so that's another kind of just flywheel thing that starts to lead to your overall success online. And then because this is omni-channel, that of course provides positive benefits in store as well. So you get kind of those dual benefits.
Cool. Great. You know, the one thing I'm thinking here, Chris, is that, you know, I think that, you know, we say here that it requires brick and mortar sell-in, but I think that we are starting to see a little bit on the retailer end that some retailers are testing online first. I know Target is kind of famous for this. They will take a brand and sort of test it online and see whether or not it warrants in-store placement. Are you seeing that at all?
Yep, that's definitely a thing that's starting to happen, and it can happen in a couple of ways. Certainly some retailers, they might have certain stores where they'll maybe take in a product into a certain amount of physical stores, and then the fulfillment that happens online actually happens out of those physical store locations.
Mm-hmm.
And so those might be sort of especially targeted, kind of e-com heavy markets or something like that. That's one way it could happen. A retailer like Target, their .com, not only do they have sort of this omni-channel option that's being fulfilled from stores, they also have special warehouses that are just meant for e-com. And so that you don't have that store element. And that's a lot of times where these sorts of programs happen as well, where you get this sort of online only option through Target. And if you do well there, then maybe they'll bring you into the store. Kroger has the same thing.
Yep. And does it kind of differ account by account, whether or not it's one buyer or potentially two buyers that are doing e-com versus brick and mortar?
Yeah, I think usually, for all the retailers that are partnering with Instacart for their e-commerce, that's going to be your same buyer because there are no buyers in Instacart. Instacart people really just manage the digital advertising and things like that. So those are going to be the same. In most brick and mortar retailers, they're still the same, but it's starting to kind of diverge into separate teams. And so I think it definitely varies sort of by retailer, I would say.
Cool, great. Mm-hmm. Okay, anything else on this slide, Chris, or are we moving on?
Nope, I think just at the end of the day there, you got to just think about all the things that applied to Amazon, the product detail pages, the digital advertising. Those are really the things that will help sort of accelerate the omni-channel business here too.
Great.
Okay, those are the two most complex. So we're going to kind of breeze through some of these, not that they're any less important. But the next kind of list of retailers here that we're going to go through are these pure play retailers that we've talked about in that vertical. One that we'll start out with really quickly is Thrive Market. A lot of you probably heard about this retailer. They were founded back in 2014. They're out in California. Super cool retailer. They're sort of known for their kind of cutting edge natural products assortment. So super knowledgeable buyers. If you've ever shopped on their site, the first thing that they'll ask you when you sign up is to go through this personalization sort of quiz about your dietary preferences. And so once you answer all these questions, they're able to sort of personalize the products that they show you from there on out. And they're super focused on sort of non-GMO as being essentially table stakes. Mm-hmm. Organic is definitely a big plus. And then kind of, products that really are tailored for a lot of these kind of specific dietary needs, keto, vegan, low FODMAP, things like that. That's kind of what they're known for. Usually when you're dealing with Thrive, they've got an awesome team of buyers that you'll deal with. Submitting products to RangeMe is kind of typically the best way to do that. And then kind of, if you do sell in, usually they're going to want to buy from a distributor unless you've got a significant scale right off the bat. They primarily partner with KeHE, so that's kind of a key piece to keep in mind. And they'll pull from KeHE kind of once you're set up there. And then, like I said, once you kind of reach a certain scale, then they might consider buying direct. Yep. When you're thinking about them, they've got a lot of cool programs to participate. One thing I'll call out when you just get started there is they have a really cool gift with purchase program, they call it. That's essentially a sampling program. I would count on being able to participate on that once you get in there, because it's a great way to get your product out to consumers and have them try it and get that repeat purchase.
Yeah, I love that. And the one thing that I'll just kind of say across the board for any of these accounts that order from a distributor, it's going to differ account by account, whether or not they're sort of big enough to turn on a distributor for you. So if you don't already have distribution in a distributor or in a DC of a distributor where this particular account pulls from, again, that they may be big enough to turn on that distributor for you. And if not, you're going to have to build up your retail your retail presence and your retail demand within other retailers from that distributor to turn that on.
Yep, for sure. Okay, the next one that we'll talk about is Vitacost, another really cool kind of health wellness focused natural and organic retailer. They were actually founded quite a while ago and kind of were one of the first e-com players in the health and wellness space back in 1999 when they launched their website. Kind of one of the big things that you saw in the news maybe a while back, and this is a while back now, but in 2014 they were actually acquired by Kroger. And so they actually share some of the same infrastructure and warehouses and things like that. And the Kroger.com kind of ship only business has some overlap with Vitacost, which is kind of a topic for another day. But Vitacost is super great. Health and wellness focused. I'd say they're not quite as not quite as targeted, or the assortment's not quite as niche as I'd say Thrive Market is. But they've got a really broad assortment of health and wellness products. They've got a good private label line. As opposed to Thrive, that, like I said, is a little more targeted on kind of what they want to bring in. Typically, they're going to maybe want a larger portion of your portfolio. They've got a pretty large selection on their site, so that's kind of a positive, I think, for new brands starting out. From a supply chain perspective, they'll typically buy direct from brands. Maybe they'll go through a distributor if you're really small, but they're more likely, I'd say, than Thrive Market to go direct. There is some complexities in dealing with them right off the bat in terms of, I mentioned the Kroger connection. They've got a fairly detailed item setup process that takes a little time once they actually bring an item in, because it's linked to Kroger systems. Nothing to really worry about, just something to be aware about. And then when it comes to marketing on the site, if you get in, they like to run these really kind of 2-week long themed promos. So they run non-GMO promos, organic promos, things like that. Where they run vendor funded coupons on those programs to really drive sales and get those going.
Cool.
Okay, Boxed, another really cool one, founded back in 2013. The best way to think about Boxed is this is an online club retailer. So just like a Costco or a Sam's Club, typically what they're going to carry here from a merchandising perspective, they've got a smaller assortment. They carry sort of club packs usually. So think larger pack sizes, larger quantities, something that's a little bit bigger usually that provides a value to the shopper from a kind of a price per ounce or a price per unit kind of perspective. That's what they're going to want. And so when you're thinking about what's the right item to bring in there, kind of think club pack, think that way. They're going to want something that's a little differentiated in that way than kind of probably your standard offering at grocery or in other places in e-com. So a lot of times it works to think about, maybe if you're just starting out, if you have the ability to create a multi-pack or a larger pack size, maybe save that for Boxed and kind of think about how you would want to lead there with them, because they're a great retailer that's growing super quickly and getting a lot of awareness. They're in the news all the time. So super cool retailer. If you do get in, they usually buy direct. So that's, I think, a plus for small brands as well. You don't have to worry about the distributor as much. And then again, they're going to probably recommend that you participate in some level of marketing programs with them. They've got these monthly deals and deals of the week programs, which are great for brands starting out. That'll get you on the homepage and get some sales turning.
Great.
I heard. Key one that I think about this is they do about 80% of their business internationally. So this is actually a really interesting way for domestic US brands to get international brand awareness going and access to that market. So they've got a big facility out in California that they ship out of, and then they actually ship overseas, primarily to Southeast Asia and East Asia, which is kind of where they've kind of made a name for themselves. They're more heavily focused on supplements, I'd say, than some of these others in terms of supplements versus food and other categories. So that's kind of their bread and butter. They do have a large private label brand, so they've got about 10 sub-brands that are all in the supplement space that sell on the iHerb site. They also like to buy direct, so that's, I think, another plus for brands. One thing to keep in mind when you're working with them is usually because they have typically higher shipping costs with all the international shipping, they're pretty aggressive on their margin asks and things. And I think the trade-off there is knowing that because you're getting this international access, it's sort of access to a market that you wouldn't get other places.
Great.
Okay, Lucky Vitamin, another really cool one, family-owned business that's out of Pennsylvania, a little bit smaller than some of the others, but Really great health and wellness focused website. Again, mostly supplements, but they do carry kind of a full line of consumables. They have a great private label line. They usually work with UNFI as a distributor, so that's kind of something to keep in mind as well. And then, from a promotion, kind of price and promotion standpoint, they'll usually ask for kind of monthly, bi-monthly, maybe 10% off promos. And they've got kind of a whole host of marketing programs you can participate that are pretty low cost because it's a little bit smaller of a website. So that's nice for small brands to kind of really get visibility for your brand and build that awareness and get sales going.
Perfect.
Swanson Vitamins, they're another one sort of like Lucky Vitamin, I'd say a little bit smaller, but great. They've been around for a while, headquartered in Fargo, North Dakota. They actually have a flagship physical store that's really cool out in Fargo that you can go visit. So this is kind of, like we said earlier, the lines between online and physical stores blur a little bit. From a merchandising strategy, they do have a pretty heavy focus on private label. You'll see that kind of all over their site, especially in supplements. So that's sort of something to keep in mind. But again, kind of good full assortment of health and wellness focused products. They also typically like to use distributors, primarily Unify, but also KeHE and some others. And then just like Lucky Vitamin, they've got a nice little suite of marketing programs and promos available at sort of respectable costs, I'd say, compared to some of the others to start getting awareness there.
Cool, great. So I think for the sake of time, I'm going to flip through the rest of these pretty quickly. Chris, are you good with that?
Yep.
Okay, great. So these are just other ones. We've touched on them a little bit already, but ones that you should definitely consider. Grove Collaborative is for sure a great option to think about if you are in the household cleaner space, body care, some supplements. That's really what their primary focuses are. And they have some pretty large initiatives around going plastic free. So they have a 5-year plan around that. So any brand that's going to come to them that, meets sort of the natural requirements as well as the sustainability and the environmental friendly piece with the plastic is going to get priority with them. You can ship direct to them. They've got pretty decent margins. They have some good programs that you can work with, and they've obviously gained a huge traction, a huge audience. Chris, I think you're going to talk about this one.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes, Imperfect Foods, super cool. Think about them as sort of a distressed outlet, just like a grocery outlet might be. So they started kind of with a mission to eliminate food waste. So really cool mission out of San Francisco. Basically, the best way to partner with them is if you've got product that's a little bit short dated, kind of coming up on that expiration date that you'd try to like to still be able to sell. That's kind of their bread and butter. And so usually what goes along with that, of course, is an expectation of a pretty steep discount, usually 40 to 50% off of kind of what you usually charge. And they'll buy direct from you. They'll put it up on their site and they include it in a subscription box. They will, although they're a distressed outlet, they are open to opportunities to partner with brands, outside of just short dated products. And so I think, it's a great way to kind of get some awareness with the sort of mission oriented consumer that shops Imperfect Foods.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next one is Hive. This is a brand new e-com retailer that just launched. They're kind of actually still in their initial test phase. They go fully live in January. And they are absolutely like natural, organic, non-GMO. And they have what they call the Hive 5, looking at ingredient integrity, sustainable packaging, a low carbon footprint, the social justice of a brand. I think this is where Hive really differentiates themselves as a retailer, is they prioritize this and they do a great job throughout their website and the selling process of telling you sort of the social impact and the environmental impact of each product that you're buying, not just the brand itself. And you sort of get a summary of all of those things when you check out at the end. And then it has to be, whatever the product it has to be rave worthy, great tasting, great performing, whatever that might be. They're ordering direct, not going through a distributor. They are really working hard not to have too many Me Too brands within a category. So only going a couple of brands deep, I would say 2 to 3 brands deep within a category, no more than that. They want a very curated selection of products. and they are actively soliciting new brands. It might just take them a little bit to sort of catch up with getting their launch happening. And then a couple more. Loop is really it's going to evolve into a retailer space, but what it really started out is, and what its primary function is right now, is a way for larger retailers to package with, to partner with them and offer reusable packaging on products that you might see across the board. So everything from Tide detergent to Pantene hair care, it's not necessarily just natural products, but this is a way to, again, eliminate plastic. You're going to see this as a trend that's building a lot of steam throughout the industry, and there's a lot of levers to pull here. So that is a good one. And again, this is really something that they're partnering with brands and partnering with retailers to make this happen. Brand list, Chris, I think you're going to touch on this one for us.
Yep, last one real quick on this. This is more of a retailer to watch. They've been around for a few years in a few different forms. Right now, they're sort of all private label. As the name states, they kind of started with this mission to sort of eliminate brands in a way, although they've sort of become a brand in the process, of course. But really the idea was to sort of eliminate this brand tax, as they call it, to provide quality, low-priced items online for consumers under this brandless private label brand. And they went through a couple of different brief stints where they did bring in some branded products. Right now it's all private label, and they actually just relaunched. So I would just flag this as a retailer to pay attention to for changes and opportunities in the future.
Perfect. And I think we've got one more that you're going to touch on for
Walmart
us.
Marketplace, really quickly. This is like Amazon in many ways. The key thing I'd say here is this is when we're talking about the Walmart Marketplace, it's actually different than the omni-channel Walmart that we just discussed earlier. So omni-channel Walmart is you sell into the store, and then you're able to go to walmart.com, build a full basket of groceries, and get that delivered to your house within a few hours. Walmart Marketplace is the second piece of the Walmart e-commerce ecosystem, and that's kind of more of their Amazon style, 2-3 day delivery website. Different assortment. The assortment lives in warehouses, in e-commerce warehouses, as opposed to in the stores. And then those products are going to be shipped to you, via FedEx or UPS or things like that, to your door within 2 to 3 days. Cool. It has a separate buying team. So a different way of dealing with Walmart than the kind of traditional Walmart path. I think one of the cool things to think about here is they have self-serve tools as well. You can sell into Walmart as a retailer, or you can actually set up a 3P account just like you can on Amazon, which is what I'd recommend to get started. Same things apply, optimizing your product detail pages, advertising to get sales traction. And then it's a useful way to kind of take that Walmart.com success, if you're able to generate that, back to the physical stores team and say, hey, look what we were able to do over here, as maybe more ammo to get into the stores.
Great. Okay, Chris, now you're going to touch on some of the fundamentals for us, kind of going through the 5 fundamentals. A lot of stuff you've already touched on a little bit, but you're going to go a bit more into each of them.
Yep, so you could spend a lot of time talking on each of these. So I'm just going to give some quick highlights of things for brands to start thinking about that are a little bit different than what they're used to dealing with in brick and mortar. The first 2 I'll talk about are product detail pages and e-commerce advertising. So we've talked about this a little bit already, but essentially what this means is now that the shelf has become digital and it's not just your actual physical packaging that sits on a shelf that's representing your product. When you're developing products, you need to have sort of a set of digital content pieces ready to succeed in e-commerce. So usually what that means is a set of high quality digital packaging images. You want some sort of lifestyle images or images that show your product in use, infographics that call out key highlights of each of the products in image format, short video maybe if you could get there, but those sorts of digital assets you're going to want on hand for all of your products. You're also going to want a good consumer friendly kind of full product title that you would want displayed on a website. Usually a product detail page allows for 5 to 7 bullet points where you can call out the key differentiators and highlights of the product. Those things are also used in the website algorithm to make you discoverable in search. So having kind of a set of those things for each product is super key. So that's what I'd say, kind of as you're developing products, think about the digital shelf in addition to the physical shelf.
Great.
E-commerce advertising, this again, instead of thinking in terms of displays and in-store vehicles, most websites that you deal with in e-commerce are going to have some sort of option for you to participate in sponsored search advertising. There's a lot of different methods. What I'd say here is do a little, research, start investigating kind of what those, how to manage those platforms, what that looks like, and understand that for a website like Amazon, especially, if you don't advertise, you're not going to achieve sales because you're just not going to be able to be discoverable. And then the last three I'll kind of loop together. Unit economics, this is just understanding that there's shipping to the end consumer involved in a lot of this e-commerce, not so much the omni-channel piece that are fulfilled from stores, but in Amazon's world, they have to ship individual units to consumers within a day, and that's expensive. And so, if you're selling a $4 bag of granola online that's being shipped next day, with $6 or $7 worth of shipping, $1 worth of pick pack costs, that's not profitable for Amazon. And so a lot of times when you're dealing with e-commerce retailers, what's helpful is to think about how you can, bundle products together, create larger kind of pack sizes, things like that with higher price points that are a little more profitable with shipping in mind. So that's kind of important when you're thinking about Amazon. If you were to launch a direct-to-consumer business, same thing, because you're going to have to pay for the shipping. So that's something to keep in mind. Map management, this is really just describing the world of online price matching. So be aware that when you launch a product into an online retailer, that price point now becomes available to every other retailer out there who's watching. And so it's easy to sort of, if you're trying to kind of, pricing is especially good at one retailer, another retailer is going to be able to see that and ask why they don't have the same thing, or they might have the ability to actually match that price and just bump their price down automatically. So another thing to be able to sort of just be cognizant of, and that's a big topic within e-com. And then the last thing in logistics, this is just really about, again, in keeping with the unit economics, understanding that with e-com, there's this extra component of shipping to the end consumer that comes into the profitability equation for the retailers and for you as a brand. So instead of just shipping freight, on a truck to a retailer and then you're done, there's this extra element of shipping to the end consumer, which add costs for everybody and sort of makes the model typically a little more expensive. But there are ways to get around that and things like that. But just another consideration.
Cool, Chris. I think there's so much more we could talk about on the slide,
yes,
but we're gonna keep moving.
You could talk about these all day.
All day. And maybe we'll do something another day that goes kind of deeper into those topics. So guys, we just kind of wanted to wrap up with some key takeaways. We gave you a lot of information today. Obviously, number one, the growth opportunity here. E-commerce is not going away. COVID has advanced this by at least 5 to 10 years, and it's forever shifted consumer buying patterns. So it's an important piece of the puzzle for you. So make sure you're thinking about it. That's point number 2, the COVID trend, not going away. We saw that in the data. Consumers are going to stay buying online even after the pandemic is over. We talked about this a lot. Chris touched on it quite a bit, point number 3, but e-commerce is it's not just about a place to sell your products or how you sell your products. It is about your full online presence and how consumers think about you as a brand based off of all these different places that you show up and how you show up there. Number 4 is that within e-commerce, there's multiple distinct channels. We talked to you about a bunch of them today. And outside of that, you need to think about the strategy of how does your e-com strategy align with your brick and mortar strategy, with your DTC strategy, with sort of your social media strategy. These are all a piece of the puzzle. And again, this is something we could talk a lot more on, but it's the point is that you want to be more conscious and deliberate about the strategy that you have as a brand. It can get you into a bit of trouble down the road if you just sort of like blast out all the same things to all the same places. Then you might have to backpedal at some point and separate it, work to separate that out. And it's just more work on the back end versus on the front end. 5, DTC. We didn't go into, too heavy into the DTC stuff, but it's a great way for you to build your brand. And there's lots of different ways you can do that. And again, we're going to have a presentation on building your digital presence and engaging your online community. 6 is with marketplaces like Amazon. While they offer that instant access, they don't offer instant sales. So it's important for you to really manage that, to build up your presence there, get your reviews, do your advertising, and be a true partner on that site. 7 is pure play retailers offer additional distribution opportunities, often targeted towards specific consumer segments. So that's a lot of the accounts that we went over today. So those are our key takeaways. Chris, I really want to thank you for everything you did. And Lisa Schultz, who you guys might not have seen yet, but she is our director of operations here. These two have worked tirelessly on this presentation, and I'm just super proud of you guys and what you did here. So thank you for everything. And we wanted to just kind of end by saying that this presentation, we're not sharing the presentation itself widely, although the recording to the presentation will be out on our social platforms, and we'll send out an email about this as well. But the presentation itself is being given to our clients. And then if you're interested in doing a strategy session with us, it's a free call. It takes about an hour. For anyone who wants to do that, we'll send you the actual PowerPoint presentation as well. Lise, I think that brings us right to the hour. Were there any burning questions that we need to address before we log off?
Yeah, we do. We actually do have a couple of questions, two as they relate to RangeMe. The first one being, can you address the RangeMe aspect as it relates to omnichannel?
Yeah, so there's a lot that we can say there. And Lise, I think that because this is a bit, I think, more of a complex question, and it differs from retailer to retailer. So I would just capture whoever asked that question, and let's follow up. Let's get their email address. If you can maybe send that to us, our email addresses are right there on the bottom, and we can follow up with you separately.
Great. And then I think one other thing we could probably answer pretty quickly is explaining the difference between Walmart Marketplace versus Walmart.com.
Yeah, perfect. Chris, you kind of touched on that, but can you just give us like sort of the 30-second tour on that again?
Yep. So it used to be really clear because there were actually two separate websites, but they actually in the past year merged them together, which made it a little bit confusing. So what I would say is the way I would think about it is you've got Walmart grocery, and actually if you go to Walmart, there's only one website. You go to walmart.com, and up in the left-hand corner, you'll see two options. There's a grocery option, and then I forget what the other one's called. But the grocery option is the one that's tied to the physical stores. So you're going to put in a zip code. It's going to show you the closest Walmart store, and then you're going to be able to shop for your full basket of groceries, including perishables, that are going to be able to be delivered same day from that store. The Walmart Marketplace, which is what they used to call Walmart.com, but sort of same thing now, is the one I described at the end, where this is the other piece of the Walmart.com website that doesn't have same day options, also doesn't have perishable food options. It's more of your Amazon style kind of next day, 2-day delivery, where they have a broader set of other kinds of products that they store at a warehouse and ship out. And there are two different teams that manage those two platforms.
Great, wonderful. That's super helpful. Thank you. Was that it, Lise, or anything else that we need to?
That will do it.
Okay, yep. Wonderful. Well, thank you everyone for attending this session live today. Again, we're going to have this available on our social platforms, and we hope to hear from you soon. And good luck in e-commerce. We know it's a beast to manage, and hopefully this session sets you up a little bit more clearly to do it. So thanks, everyone.
Okay, thanks.